And we're back. Yesterday we were in Kenya. Now we are with the executive director of the Global Student Forum. My name is Benjamin Fraser. I have the honor of serving as the chairperson of the CSA. Proud Jamaican, proudly living in Jamaica. I wish I could package some of the sunshine and send it to Sebastian, who is in cold, cold Austria, but he has a fireplace by him. I'll allow him to give his own introduction.
Thanks so much, Benjamin, for the invitation, and some sunshine would be truly appreciated at the moment in Austria, but I think also in Belgium, where I'm usually based, working as the director of the Global Student Forum, and really, really happy for the opportunity to be here and chat with you about what we are doing and kind of common priorities between our organizations. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you, sir. So today, we're going to be, the topic is this: ensuring that high-level education advocacy has grassroots impact. What does that mean? I have heard my peers make very slight comments about going to certain international meetings, the use of talking. You know, they pretty much say you're not doing anything, you're just traveling, or you're just writing documents. But I know, Sebastian knows, the young people who devote their time to this kind of work, they know how it is that this kind of engagement trickles down to the grassroots. And I want to use this CSA Fireside to help our constituents learn about the Global Student Forum and learn how it impacts at the grassroots level. So my first question to you, Sebastian, is what is the Global Student Forum?
Well, the Global Student Forum is still a relatively young organization, founded in 2020 by, among other pre-existing large-scale regional democratic and representative federations, the Commonwealth Student Association, but also the European Students' Unions on the tertiary and the secondary level, so OBESO, the Organizing Bureau of European School Student Unions, and the European Students' Union for University Students, alongside the All Africa Students' Union and the Latin and the American and Caribbean Students' Union. They came together in 2020 and in the years ahead of that to form the Global Student Forum as a democratic and representative voice for student organizations, both from school and universities, on the international level, where for many years, basically since the end of the Cold War, students did not have a voice in the decision-making spaces that affect the lived realities, the educational, social, economic, and political realities that our constituency is experienced. So that's the reason why the Global Student Forum was launched as a union to influence these processes, primarily among many other mission priorities that we have at this point of our existence.
And why was it necessary to have a student organization at the global level, whereas there was UN Youth Envoy and other youth global counterpart organizations?
Well, I think that the work of the UN Youth Envoy and many other youth organizations in the global space is extremely important. But if you look at the specific constituency in terms of demography that students represent, and also our placement at the intersection between education spaces, between policy and society, it was really important to have a voice, especially looking at student governance at different levels. If you look at your university, at your school, in most countries in the world, you will have a student council where student representatives are elected to deal with the university leadership, the institutional leadership, and do work on behalf of their peers. And the same applies to the national level, where in most countries of the world you have national unions, and in regional, supranational, intergovernmental organizations where you have democratic structures for the interest representation of students. However, on the global level, that has not been the case, because the International Union of Students that was founded after the Second World War unfortunately broke apart in the bloc dynamics of the time due to dogmatic thinking and more and more polarization. So for 40 years, while teachers had their own union, while universities have their own umbrella organization on the global level, working with UNESCO, with the UN, and other big education stakeholder spaces, we did not have to. We do not have a union to do that on our behalf, and I think that's where we came in, and that's also one of our most important, areas of engagement at the moment, to really develop from the ground institutional pathways for advocacy within these spaces, ensure that representative and accountable young people, students, get into these spaces and bring the first-hand experience of their constituents into these policy-making processes.
I'm going to preface my next question by saying the rest of this chat could pretty much take up the entire time talking about the achievements of the GSF. I mean, you guys hit the ground running. 3 years, and I scrolled through the Instagram, to sort of cement my understanding of the GSF, and I'm thinking, wow. But I'll allow you to speak to it. Give us the highlights of the achievements.
It's really sweet of you to portray our development in that way. I think we had a lot of ups and downs on the way, but some of the things that I think we can really be proud of is that we have managed in a relatively short amount of time to put student democracy on the map of international decision-making spaces through really targeting fora that relate to education, but also social policy within the UN framework, and bringing students into these spaces, ensuring that we have broad consultations all the way from the grassroots level that then feed into advocacy on the global level. But also claiming spaces in the sense of that we have managed to create student seats in the decision-making bodies of, for example, UNESCO with the high-level steering committee and the Sherpa group, where student representative is now representing our movement. In ECW, the Education Cannot Wait, the biggest multilateral fund for education and emergencies, where we have a youth and student representative related to the Global Student Forum sitting in the high-level steering group and the executive committee. But also when it comes to other organizations like the MCO, the Magna Charta Universitatum Observatory, or the Global Campaign for Education, where we all have a system now to influence the decisions that are being made. And by coordinating these different positions that are held by students, I think we have a considerable impact on the policy making on that level. And I think one of the most important achievement was the recognition in the declaration of the Transforming Education Summit last year at the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly, that it was adopted that student representative and student representative organizations need to be involved in education policy making at all levels of decision making. So I think that is something we've been quite well in achieving. I think where we are not so well placed at the moment is the question of funding. It has always been extremely difficult to sustain independent structures. It's easy to get funding if you're willing to accept political or commercial strings attached. But in order to ensure political independence, it's really hard to find money, and that's something where we have been less performing, I would say. But all in all, I think it is also an achievement that we managed to bring together organizations that have a very, very different culture and often very different political stances on some issues, by understanding that there are so many struggles that we are facing, that students all across the world are facing, and that we can campaign together and alongside each other for. And I hope that I'm personally on my way out. My mandate is finishing very, very soon, that in 10 years, 20 years, this cooperation will be stronger and have an even stronger impact on the decisions that shape the lives of learners worldwide.
So describe the GSF's relationship with some of these partners that are so critical to our advocacy, such as the UN and the other international partners.
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead. That's a question.
I think for us, the relationship with UNESCO is really important because UNESCO is at the heart of education policy making on the global level. And We've been working very closely with their monitoring team. We have been launching together different reports. We've been holding lots of events together with UNESCO, and have been working very closely in their different policy-making streams in order to bring the voices of young people and students into these spaces. But also more recently with the United Nations, as such, the Transforming Education Summit, as I was saying, was the largest, and I think in our generation, and will remain the largest gathering of really high level people up to heads of states to discuss the education crisis that we are facing worldwide, the huge lack of funding in order to achieve SDG 4. And basically we managed to bring our voice into these spaces, and also involved in different follow-up initiatives, including the high-level panel on the teaching profession that Antonio Guterres has been putting together, where we talk about how can we bridge the gap of 70 million teachers that we are currently missing in order to achieve SDG 4 and the 150 billion annually in order to finance that. So that's why it's important to have a space in these discussions, and the UN has definitely the most potential to bring together international actors, and that's why the UN is the institution for us to engage with in this regard. Yes.
So there are some partnerships that I would like you to explain how they trickle down to students, starting with United Nations Teaching Profession High-Level Panel. Yeah.
So I mean, the idea of this is that there's both a trickling up and then trickling down again. So for the high-level panel, we have been consulting in different regional consultations, but also with a global consultation involving student representatives, specifically from the secondary level, as to what they are expecting from their education and from their teachers, and that's what we're trying to bring into these negotiations. This has been going on for 2 months, and our key message there, among many other important issues, when we talk about why do we miss 70 million teachers at the moment, but what is the reason for that? Obviously, that is a lot about working conditions, it's about salaries, it's about dignity and respect, but also safe environments, and ensuring that we provide good education to teachers. These are all important things, but the key thing that we've been hearing is all of that is connected to lack of funding. And that's not an issue that is specific to Europe. That is not an issue that's specific to Africa or Latin America. Wherever we go, obviously you have bigger problems in developing countries. There is a lack of funding that then impacts the educational experience that students receive, and in many countries, unfortunately, do not receive at all. So what we try to do is to bring these experiences into these panels and really speak from the experience of students on the ground, in the hope that the outcome documents, the outcome recommendations that then are being presented to the member states for their consideration will actually reflect these aspirations and concerns, and like this have an impact on the educational realities of the people we represent. But obviously, I think with these high-level advocacy things, no matter if it's at the UN or if it's at the regional level, same with the EU, where I was working with ESO before, it takes time. It takes a lot of time till these things trickle down and are felt on the ground. So it can be quite an unrewarding work, in the sense of that you probably only see the impact of what you've been doing, if you're lucky, many years later. But I think it's still important to...
You used a very triggering term for several persons who have participated in the development of outcome statements, because they require so much effort, so much research, so much coordination and drafting and legalese, and it may just seem like a piece of paper, but as you said, these are the documents that we can use to refer our national governments to. This is what you committed to at the global level, and we can ground our advocacy in this literature. So these outcome statements aren't just words that we want to put together to say we had an outcome statement, but in that continuum of advocacy that spans sometimes several executive directors, several chairpersons, several teams, it all adds up. So they're not a waste.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Then it's really important to coordinate that follow-up and to ensure that people understand that national unions then use that and say, listen, you were in New York last year, you said that and that and that and that. So I think that kind of advocacy is an ongoing process. It doesn't end with having this statement adopted and going home from a conference, but it's really about being persistent and ensuring that we all pull at the same string in terms of then
Absolutely.
getting people to implement and hold them accountable.
Absolutely. Next, education cannot wait. How does that impact the average student? The GSF's relationship with ECW, that is.
Yes, so ECW is indeed one of the first multilateral humanitarian funds that moved ahead with a bold step to create a youth and student constituency. So basically a constituency within its governance structure where youth and student organizations can become members. And they then have the opportunity to elect every 2 years their representatives into the executive committee and the high-level steering group of Education Cannot Wait as a fund. So this is a wonderful thing, and we hope that many other similar institutions will come to the conclusion that there is a real added value of having these voices in high-level decision making. ECW specifically, as the name suggests, is focused on education and emergencies and really supports education in those areas, regions, countries where education is at risk. And they do extremely important work in providing aid and providing financial resources and books and everything you need in order to sustain education in catastrophic environments. Now, what we have been doing this year is we ran as the Global Student Forum for the position with a colleague from Uganda who has been working a lot with refugees on the ground, and another colleague who has been seeing the prolonged crisis in Honduras. And they are coordinating this group. This group is consisting of many organizations that do education and emergencies work at the ground, both refugee and grassroots youth organizations. And basically, they provide the Education Cannot Wait leadership with the perspectives that are needed in order to understand these multifaceted issues and help them to tailor-make solutions that really have the impact that is needed on the ground. So that's the role of Education Cannot Wait specifically. It's very specific on education and emergencies. And we're still new into this space, but we are doing our best to facilitate as much consultation, as much involvement of people on the ground in refugee camps, in affected areas as we can.
So essentially, when we support Education Cannot Wait, we are validating this organization's mission to secure emergency funding for students. And that emergency funding will go directly into spaces where their education is being threatened by crisis. So natural disasters, conflict, war.
Yes.
And I mean, we're living in exactly that time. Jamaica could have just easily been a beneficiary of some funding from Education Cannot Wait on Monday. We had an earthquake that shook the foundation of our small island. I've never felt an earthquake so terribly in my almost 3 decades. I mean, I really want the listeners of this fireside to develop an appreciation for the work that these organizations do, though you may not feel it in your space, though you may think, well, my country isn't benefiting. If you look in some refugee camps where children would have not otherwise been able to read had it not been for the GSF, its other part, the Education Cannot Wait partners coming together. I mean, follow their page. I've seen what they do. They literally raise money. They have their ways of raising money, and you just see the dollars going up and up and up and up of pledges. And I really hope they get those pledges because they seem to be quite genuine about what they do. The next one, 100 million campaign. And I know 100 million campaign did a lot of work during the pandemic and still continues to do great work.
But well, 100 Million Campaign is a youth-led and student-led organization that basically fights against poverty and child labor. It was founded by the Nobel Peace Laureate Kailash Satyarthi from India. He received the prize in 2014, I think, for his work in freeing children from forced labor in India. And basically, 100 Million Campaign is the advocacy arm of Kailash's work that then developed into an organization that is led by both survivors of child labor, but also the leadership of Democratic Youth and Student Organization has been doing incredible work, specifically throughout the pandemic, in raising awareness to the fact that it made everything worse in terms of the educational situation, but also when we look at the numbers of child laborers, it's higher than ever before. Despite all the pledges, despite all the commitments, and the most recent publication on the situation in Africa is a brutally honest statement and assessment on how we are neglecting our responsibility to not leave anyone behind more than ever before. And I think that's the beauty of 100 Million Campaign, that they have the space at the cross-section between student unions, youth organizations. Recently, we have been campaigning together with them in the Justice for Africa campaign that is targeting international financial institutions, the World Bank, but also the International Monetary Fund, to expose the injustice that we see in the international financial architecture when it comes to the treatment of developing countries, and specifically Africa. For example, my country in which I live, Belgium, and the UK together hold more decision-making power in the IMF than all sub-Saharan countries, sub-Saharan African countries together. So these things, these very systemic injustices are being targeted by the 100 Million Campaign, and I think it's really important because they talk about financing, they talk about injustices that are deeply engraved in our international order, that come from a colonial mindset, that come from international politics as they were being conducted in the last few hundred years. And unfortunately, we are still not in a position to rectify these injustices. So 100 Million is a really important player in this space, and we are in full support of what they're doing.
And I know for a fact that GSF has collaborated in multiple ways with 100 Million Campaign. And finally, of the much longer list, well, we'll just stop here, the SAIH.
The Student Impact on Higher Education Globally project, you mean? Yes.
Yes.
Well, one of the kind of priorities, strategic priorities that were given to us when the organization was founded is to create research capacity and to basically create an overview of the impact that student unions have had on education policy, on societal development in politics, by creating a mapping effort within our membership. And when discussing this idea with a former Secretary General of the European Students' Union, Manja Klemencic, who is now a senior lecturer at Harvard University and has spent her whole academic career researching education governance and student unions, we came to the conclusion that it would be a timely effort to bring together the membership of the Global Student Forum, many unions of the CSA, ESU, ASU, OCLAI, but also the regional federations and us to create a comparative study upon how students and their unions have impacted university and higher education governance and policy over the years. And what came out of this 2-year effort that was really, really intense for, I think, everyone involved, is a book that will be published now in February 2024 by Bloomsbury US, called Students, Politics and Representation Globally. And it will be the first of its kind research handbook depicting the history and the impact of the student movement in the last 100 years. That's how far some of these national case studies go back, and the regional case studies less, but it's definitely worth looking at. And we had the opportunity, thanks to some donors, to purchase an open access license. So you won't have to buy that book for probably more than $100, which is usually the case for these kind of applications, but you can download it for free as a PDF. So we can make the maximum use of it. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Or too, I recall that CSC has a chapter
Indeed,
in that
yes,
book.
a very
Yes.
good one.
Yes. What is tax justice? The GSF has worked on a number of themes. Now, I'll be very honest with you, Sebastian. There are many times when I see the GSF working on some things and I just start Googling because I don't know. Yes. I am very passionate about education, but I'm a student in this space. I'm telling you, I have learned so much by listening and reading. I know that as chairperson, I'm probably supposed to know far more than I actually do, but I'm the kind of guy, I'm not afraid to say I'm learning. So when I initially saw this thing about tax justice, I was like, what? What does tax justice have to do with education? But then I read and I listened. Yes. And I would like you to share with our constituents why did the GSF do such intense campaigning and continues to do very intense campaigning on tax justice?
Well, I share the openness to say I'm also learning every day, and the fact that we're campaigning on so many issues because different organizations and constituencies are pushing for certain new frontiers in terms of our advocacy. I have learned a tremendous amount over the last few years in getting into these things, and I think tax justice is one of the most important campaigns that we're driving forward at the moment, because I think it's the underlying issue of something that is extremely often protested by student unions all across the world, especially now. If we talk about tuition fees, if we talk about privatization, commercialization of education, if we talk about the cost of living crisis, all of that is related to how money is divided within our society, and whether or not there is public budgets available for ensuring free quality access that is publicly funded to education is very much a question of distribution. And when we look at the tax justice situation for education, specifically the domestic budgets are really important, because up to 97% of education budgets come from domestic budgets, right? So there is it's not aid that is primarily responsible for financing education, but it's countries and their fiscal space, so the availability of funds that they can get out of their taxation. Now, what we often hear, and I guess as a student representative for many years, you have heard the same when you approach your ministers and say, listen, please lower the tuition fees, please give us better grants, give us better support services. They tell us there is no money in the system. So there's the division question, but also how can we ensure that we widen the fiscal space, and together with ActionAid, together with the Tax Aid Alliance and many others, we fundamentally believe that if we look at the global injustices when it comes to wealth distribution, that those who have unimaginable, immoral amounts of wealth, and that's often multinational corporations, they have to pay their taxes. Most multinational corporations find tax loopholes, especially those extracting resources and labor from the global south. They don't create any value for the public budgets there. They extract the value and do not pay any taxes. So if we would ensure that we close these tax loopholes, if we would ensure that the richest of the richest in our society and those big multinational corporations give their fair share, it would be much easier to sustain public funding for education, for health services, for all the things that relate to the public services that a state should provide to its constituents, to its people. So we believe there is enough money in the system. It's just not in the right hands. And tax justice ultimately is the method to combat that, and hopefully redistribute funds to ensure that we can afford free quality education that is accessible to all. I hope that made sense.
Absolute sense. I think that any average listener, you don't need a degree to understand what was just explained. But I drifted off in my thoughts a little bit as you were speaking, and I thought about the numerous times where I saw money being spent, but maybe a few days before, when money was called for something important, it's not there. But with full respect to how people value priorities, Well, partially, because some of it I really don't respect it. But when I look at what is spent on things like football, football is great. Don't crucify me. But Neymar was flown on a whole UFO. I can't even call it a jet. A big UFO to a country. What they spent on Lionel Messi in Miami, I mean, if a fraction of what could go, of what has gone into a game of a ball,
Yeah.
if a fraction of what has been spent on that game in the last 10 years could go in education, we would have the 150 billion per year for the teachers that we need to fill the gap. When I think about, again, respectfully, war, when I saw how much money was being thrown at the Ukraine-Russia conflict overnight, just billions of dollars, going into weapons and more weapons, more high-level weapons, I'm thinking, where was this money all along? Did you just print it overnight? Is it that education is so far below the line? When they say, I don't remember what the percentage is, but something like what, 60% of children can't read a normal sentence?
Yeah.
I need to fact check that statistics, but it's pretty bad. That to me is a crisis that should urge the governments and multinationals of the world to intervene. But no, we will find the money for recreational things and, of course, protecting land and egos. So, I mean, I would invite all students to share the call for tax justice, learn about it, and by sharing it, we have power in our numbers. The next thematic area is climate justice. How does that affect students, and why has the GSF been so keen on ensuring that its voice is included?
I think the climate movement has been largely led by young people and largely led by students, like bringing this issue to the streets and building up pressure on decision makers has been a thing that was dominated by young people, and obviously at this intersection between young people, between education spaces, between having a global movement at your hand, we think it's really important for the international student movement to engage with the issue of climate justice. We have been working on this since 2020, basically bringing together student and youth organizations in a first climate summit in 2020 to talk about what is our vision for climate justice. How can we organize better? How can we basically learn from the mistakes in the past, especially then going out of the pandemic? How can we ensure that we revitalize the momentum that there was before half the world was put into lockdowns and there were no demonstrations happening anymore? For us, it was really important to have student representatives equipped with the skills, but also with a common advocacy framework and vision in order to influence the processes at the Conference of the Parties. And we've been doing this before COP27. We had a pre-COP summit in Accra, Ghana, where we brought together student reps from across the globe who then went on to attend COP to define their vision for climate justice, and specifically the vision for quality climate change education. I think we are very well positioned to demand a rethinking of curricula to ensure that sustainable development and quality climate change education is included throughout all levels of curricula and throughout all sectors of education, so that learners that graduate from education are not only supported throughout the educational journey in order to live sustainable lives and be able to protest for what they're believing in instead of being penalized by educational institutions, but also then go on to be multiplicators in the job market, in whatever institutions they are being active after their educational journey. And I think really at the core of this is that when we teach about climate, that the justice aspect is that we understand that those who are suffering the most at the moment, those countries, those people, are the ones who contributed the least to the catastrophe that is unfolding, and that we cannot as a developed nations brace off this responsibility that they are shouldering for having gotten to this point by releasing emissions through unhinged capitalism and development. And there needs to be a price paid in supporting the adaptation of those countries who are now suffering the consequences of this. So I think that is really important in climate justice, and that is important that young people, that students, that learners internalize this, so we can have a mitigation strategy that is just.
I really should do my fact checking. So I did double check the statistics on child literacy. I was right. It was that bad. That's what UNESCO said. But I think in the last COP, there was the first commitment to a fund where governments agreed that they would pay to support. And would you agree that students were influential behind calling for such a fund?
I would not say only students, but it was definitely one of the strongest debates we had in Accra, also with the authorities, the ministers that were participating. Is like, we need that fund in order to build resilience, to finance adaptation, but also to cover up for the immense losses that will result from the further heating of our planet, in terms of land that will not be able to use anymore, in terms of infrastructure that is being destroyed by extreme weather events. So this fund is really important. I think it was 100 billion that was decided upon for now, but this is obviously not enough, especially looking at the fact that if we do not act urgently, and it does not seem that we have it in us to do that at the moment, these costs will climb into unimaginable heights. And I think the follow-up is also not going as quickly as it was expected. So there was a commitment, but I think the reality is that it's not enough and not quick enough. I'm not sure, Benjamin, if I lost you. You're frozen. I suppose if this live stream is still going on, I think Benjamin has some connectivity issues. I'm just gonna wait if he returns. Yes, there he is.
Sorry about that. I just got disconnected, but we're back.
Yes, sir.
Yes. All right. So coming to the close of our talk, the last thematic area that I'd like to ask about is decolonizing education finance. And I believe you hinted at it earlier, but if you could tell us more about what that is and why GSF has been working so much on it.
I think the decolonization of education financing, on the one hand, obviously goes very much in the direction of questioning the injustices of the international financial architecture, but also refers to a set of policies and practices that are aimed at addressing the historical inequalities in education funding, particularly those that resulted from the colonial mindset of when we were building our international system, but also systemic racism and other forms of oppressions that are going on till the day. And I think the goal from our perspective, as we have been having a lot of capacity building trainings and projects around it, is to create more equitable and inclusive educational systems that on the one hand are accessible, provide all students, regardless of their background, with equal access to quality education, but also really think about what does a decolonized curriculum look like? How do we include local sensitivities, traditions, and indigenous knowledge into revised curricula in order to make them relevant and encompass national and regional and sensitivities, and go away from a solely Western focused way of acquiring and teaching knowledge. And I think it's a really important topic to engage, especially with our membership having so many different organizations and so many different kind of approaches to education. We have a wonderful baseline to work on this topic and to bring together different ideas of what that could look like. We're working with Obeso a lot, that have been leading a capacity building project, but also a wonderful toolkit for that I can recommend anyone to look at. So that's I think that's a quick summary of what it means to us.
Mm-hmm. My last off-script question to you, as the person who has been at the helm, you have to manage a wide range of cultural sensitivities. You're dealing with Oakleigh, with its own philosophy on student representation and activism. La Lucha, the struggle, they are very hands-on, you know,
yeah.
They confront. You're dealing with the All Africa Students Union that is based in Africa, that has its own culture as well, and Africa has its own way of doing things. You're dealing with the Commonwealth Students Association, that we carry a name that other people don't like to hear, frankly. And there are many perceptions about the CSA. You're dealing with European student organizations. How have you managed in these last 3 years to balance the differences, capitalize on those differences? How have you managed to keep this thing together? What strategy have you employed as executive director?
I think it's a really relevant question, and I think we had the privilege to a certain extent when starting this organization that there was a mutual understanding between the leadership of the regional federations that were the founding members, that this right now is a unique opportunity. It came after almost 40 years. For the first time, we had the people in place. We did the groundwork. We had a common understanding of the things that we share, the things that we want to focus on, and we had funding. We convinced a big funder to provide us with a seed grant in order to get this work going. So unlike in many other spaces that I've been as an elected student representative before taking on this role as ED in a staff capacity, in many student union spaces, it's a lot about fighting, a lot about not really focusing on the greater good, but trying to push through your narrow political agendas, may it cost what it will. I think we managed to avoid that for a very long time because we knew we don't want to fall into the same traps that have destroyed international student organizations before. And we've been very, very clear that when it comes to national issues that are affecting a certain region, in the end, it is that region that will provide guidance for us on how to handle that in order not to infringe on the remit that other representative and democratic structures have, specifically when it comes to geopolitical issues. So we've been focusing on the struggles that we share, and I think we've been valuing the opportunity we got to start this organization, and that was the overarching, I think, go ahead that we had in order to make it that far. But it's definitely not always easy, and it's difficult to manage expectations, and sometimes when we don't agree, find amicable paths forward. But I'm sure that we will continue to do that as long as we understand that it's a really important thing to have. And yeah, I hope that will remain the best practice in the years ahead.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, what the GSF has been able to achieve over the last 3 years, all its members should protect it. It's for us and it's for our children. The last 40 minutes of this conversation was spent on talking about how all of this high-level work impacts the average child, the average student, how this work of the GSF touches the classroom. I think we who serve as heads of the regional members should do everything in our power to ensure that regardless of whatever funding issue, regardless of whatever difference on perspectives that we may have, that this continues to serve and continues to do the unprecedented work that it has undertaken to do. Sebastian, thank you so much for your time. You have served well. I continue to admire how you do all of this. I don't know when you get time to sleep. When we were in Nigeria, where I met you for the first time, I saw how you do it. You have your laptop. And so you really don't waste time. Down times are productive times. I see you. Yes, so thank you so much. And for our listeners, take care and walk good.